Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to see everyone. This event is being held by the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation of North America. My name is Dr. Efuanyeni. I'm an OBGYN in Maryland, and I'm also the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation of North America's president-elect. I'm very happy to meet everyone. This is amazing. The new vaccines are a really nice tool for our fight against a horrible virus that's kind of killing the whole world. And we're happy to have a group of panelists here to share their knowledge with us today. I would like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Pearl. Her full name is Dr. Pearl Kwoti Kumaple. She's my big sister. And she's also one of the members of the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation of North America. We're getting a lot of questions about the virus or the vaccine and the virus from various people. And we also heard some of the information that was floating around, information and misinformation. And so we felt that, well, Carl called me and said, we need to really put out a program. And I said, yeah, it's important, but I'm really busy and I'm overwhelmed. And she agreed to help me organize it. So she was able to recruit these fantastic panelists to join us today. We picked a date and a time, and here we are. We have a lot of people who are going to be joining us. Some of them are going to be healthcare professionals, physicians, nurses, and so on. And we're really hoping that everybody will share their experiences, receive the vaccine. People can also feel free to share in the chat if you got the vaccine, what some of your side effects were, and so on and so forth. Pearl will also talk more just about the logistics of the whole program. So with much ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Kwoti Kumaple. Dr. Kwoti Kumaple is a family medicine doctor, as well as a public health specialist. She is an educator and an advocate for empowering our communities with accurate health information. She's a graduate of the Lerner College of Medicine of Case Western Reserve University, and she completed postgraduate training in family medicine and public health at Cook County Health in Chicago. She currently practices in Southwest Indiana. Dr. Kwoti, it's very nice to have you on. Please take on the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyeni, for that wonderful introduction. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our main panelists for today's program. So we have two awesome women physicians of Ghanaian heritage. First is Dr. Elfriede Agyemang. She's an infectious
Dr. Kwoti, I think you are muted.
Okay.
And unmute. Now I'm unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that.
In terms of the whole introduction for Dr. Agyemang.
Yes. So thank you, Dr. Eno, for that wonderful introduction. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our main panelists for today. We have Dr. Elfriede Agyemang. She is an infectious disease physician and a public health specialist in the Metro Atlanta area. She's dual board certified in internal medicine and infectious diseases and is a former disease detective for the U.S. Centers for Disease and Control and Prevention, AKA the CDC. And she was part of the Epidemic Intelligence Service. She's affiliated with Atlanta Clinical Care and provides infectious disease consultations at Emory St. Joseph and Northside Hospitals in Atlanta. Thank you, Dr. Agyemang, for joining us today. Our second panelist is Dr. Phyllis Nsiakumi. She is a physician leader committed to improving health and wellness with special emphasis on diverse communities. She's an expert in primary care and public health and an associate professor of internal medicine at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine, where she herself went to school. During the current pandemic, she served as a public health emergency officer. Dr. Nsiankumi is passionate about ensuring that each member of the community has clear and accurate information about COVID-19 and the COVID-19 vaccine, and is able to make good decisions for themselves as well as their families. Thank you very much, Dr. Agyemang and Dr. Nsiankumi. In addition, we do have some healthcare professionals in our audience. We have Mrs. Eunice Cromwell, who will be joining us, and we have Dr. Priscilla Osewari as well in the panel, who we will call on from time to time as well. So we're anticipating that this program will take about 90 minutes. And the overall plan is to have a quick overview of the COVID-19 vaccine, and Dr. Phyllis Nsia is gonna do that. And then after that, we have some questions that were submitted before that we're gonna address those, and then we're gonna open it up to the audience for the Q&A. And then we're anticipating that people can raise your hands and ask questions, or they can put their questions in the chat box so that they can be answered. So without further ado, I'm gonna have Dr. Nsiankumi go ahead and give us the overview. Over to you, Dr. Nsiankumi.
All right, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. So glad to see so many people are joining us today. Give me just a moment to bring up my slides. So the muting again. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Glad to see so many of you joining with us. It's an honor to be a part of today's panel and have the chance to share with you about COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines. The point of this overview, which is very, very brief, is just to tell a little bit about the vaccines. As you've heard in our introductory remarks, certainly there is a lot of misinformation and confusion about COVID-19 and the vaccines. So we wanted to point out a few key points before we begin, just to give us all a little bit of context and framework. The goal is for this to not be too detailed. It's targeted at a general audience. If you have specific questions, you can certainly raise them during the question and answer portion that will be coming up soon. So let's see. So I think one of the first questions is why were the vaccines developed? Certainly we've been hearing about the impact of COVID-19 on people all across the globe, and the numbers are obviously quite staggering. And we're doing our very best to combat that, and we've been doing public health measures, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But this vaccine, or this group of vaccines, really, because there are a number of them, were developed and designed to prevent infection from the coronavirus, the virus that causes COVID-19 disease. If by some chance someone is to actually become infected with the virus, their illness won't be as severe. But in general, the goal is truly to prevent infection from this coronavirus. We're still learning about all of the things that it does over time. And so I think we want fewer people to contract the virus and to not worry so much about those long-term effects. So this is one tool in our toolkit to really stem the tide of this devastating disease. So my next question, or maybe the next question you have, a question I've answered often, is how do the vaccines work? And the mRNA vaccines are, they have a unique mechanism, but I'm actually not going to go into the details of that. The picture is on the screen there. This is an image from Nature magazine and BBC. But I think the point that I wanted to make in putting this slide up and talking about how vaccines work is that we all have an immune system that fights off all kinds of germs, germs as we call them, but viruses, bacteria. You want your body to be prepared to fight foreign invaders. And so the goal of a vaccine is really to, in some way, have your immune system be ready to fight. And it helps train your immune system. Some viruses, some vaccines work in different ways, but the goal is to teach your immune system to recognize that this particular foreign invader, shall we say, is coming. And so the vaccine introduces something into your body that tells your immune system, you kind of got, you have to get ready to fight this. And with the second dose, we really see that our immune systems in general are really ready to fight this virus should we be exposed to it. The example that I give to a lot of people is my friends who are in pediatrics or who are school teachers. They all say that the first year when they start to teach or start to take care of children, it seems like they catch every single cold or virus or bug that the kids have. And after a year or two, I think their immune systems are ready to fight. So they're not as ill as often or not as severely ill. And I think in the same way, while the vaccine is not injecting the virus into you and not making you ill from the virus, it does teach your immune system to be prepared. And the better that our immune systems can fight off the vaccine, the better for each and every one of us, our families, our coworkers, our community, et cetera. And so people have asked, how are these vaccines given? And they're injections into the muscle. And the two that you'll see named here are Pfizer and Mrna. Those are the two vaccines that are currently approved in the United States. There are a number of vaccines in the pipeline, and I suspect we'll be answering some questions about those very shortly. But when it comes to the two vaccines that are available in the United States, there are 2 doses given 3 to 4 weeks apart. So the studies and the scientific information that we have tells us that after the second dose, you receive your maximal effectiveness from the vaccine, i.e. you are the most ready and the most prepared to fight any exposure to the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. So let's go forward to the next slide. So what can I do to prevent COVID-19? I know that we're talking about the vaccine, which is very important, but obviously there are places where the vaccine isn't available, the distribution line is slower than we would like. There are a number of things. And I think it's important to not feel completely helpless either. So certainly wearing masks, the social distancing, staying 6 feet apart, avoiding crowds, all of those, and sanitizing as best as we can, as often as we can. Those are things that we can continue to do and should continue to do even after being vaccinated. It will take a while for everyone to who is eligible and able to receive the vaccine to do so, which means we still need to continue to protect each other. And so I think I just wanted to give you all a few nuggets, a little bit of an overview. And of course, as we discuss all of these different things this afternoon, remember to consult your personal physician to get any additional information you may need about whether the vaccine is right for you. But we really wanted to spend some time this afternoon answering your questions and make sure that when the time comes to make a decision about receiving the vaccine or not, you have accurate information from sources that you can trust. So thanks for your time. And I think I'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anaphylaxis, for the very brief overview, which answers some of the questions actually that we got beforehand. So we move on to the next phase, which is answering some of the questions that were previously posed. And then we'll move on to the open Q&A session. So, and either of you, either Dr. Ajiman or Dr. Anaphylaxis, can answer this question. So the first question is, how deadly is the old COVID-19 virus versus the new strain that is out now?
All right. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I think I'll go first, and Phyllis, feel free to chime in as well. But just before I answer the question, I just wanted to thank the GPSF leadership for organizing this and inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm delighted to be here to share my experience. I just want to share that the opinions I express here do not necessarily reflect the official position or opinion of any affiliated institutions. So that's a very good question, Dr. Cordy. Earlier on, let's say until yesterday, we knew that the old one and the new variants essentially had a similar virulence. We know that the newer COVID-19, circulating COVID-19 variants are actually easily transmissible. So that means it's easy to pass from one person to the other compared to the old one. Essentially, you have more people getting infected with the newer variants. If say with the old variant, if you are able to infect one person, for the newer variants, you will be one person may be able to infect 2 people or 3 people. So that was the understanding. And with that, when more people are infected, more people are prone to have severe disease and more people are prone to die. As of last night or yesterday, we got some preliminary information from the UK stating that it is possible that these new variants may actually be also more virulent or more deadly. There's still more data that needs to be collected. It appears that the information that went into the analysis were only taking into consideration about 10% of the deaths that occurred so far. So there's still huge gaps in that data. And until we get more information, we cannot confidently conclude that the new variant is more deadly. That said, we know that it's going to spread faster. More people are going to get infected, more people are going to get seriously sick, and more people are going to die. So we need to pay attention to our 3 W's: wearing our mask, washing our hands, keeping our distance, or watching our space until we get vaccinated, whoever decides to get vaccinated, in order to control the epidemic. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajiman. So that was a very good overview of that question. The next one is, why did we get this new strain? What happened? How did that happen?
I will answer. Go ahead. Actually, I was going to answer briefly and pass it to our expert. But what I would say is that one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize about viruses is that's what they do. They mutate. That's part of how they grow and change. And so I will pass it over to the expert to give you some of the details. But I think that that's something that I think in the medical field, we're very aware that viruses change and how they change and the impact that they have on the body and on how sick people become, on what types of changes are involved. But I'm going to pass it back to our infectious disease expert for that.
Oh my, the pressure is, I think we are all as much of our experts at this stage. So as Dr. Nsekumi said, we know viruses mutate, and they mutate all the time. Like as they transmit or they move from one person to the other, they change, their arrangements or genetic configuration a little bit, just to make sure that they're more comfortable, or to make sure they are more robust, I should say. So as the changes occur, sometimes it's meaningful, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it ends up causing the virus to die. Sometimes it makes the virus more virulent. So I think it's more because we have a higher burden of disease and it's being transmitted from one person to the other. It's dividing, the cells are dividing very often. It's more prone to make more errors. And in that, sometimes it results in mutations. Some mutations are meaningful, others are not. And in this case, it seems like it's more meaningful because it's making the virus more easily to be able to pass on from one person to the other. Over.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So with that, I'm actually going to move on to the next question, which was actually posed because we've actually answered all the pre questions. So Caro is asking, so will the current COVID-19 vaccine be useful against the new strands, or I guess she means the new strains of the COVID-19 virus? And any of you can answer it.
All right. So I will take that. Currently, all the variants that we've seen impact what we call one of the proteins on the virus called the spike protein. The good thing about, the good thing about the configuration of the spike protein is that it has different shapes on the surface. And that is actually the reason why it's able to bind to the cell and enter the cell. With the current vaccines that we have, it's able to attach to any part of the spike protein. The current mutations we are having is not causing as much or significant changes in the spike proteins that the vaccines that we have can still work. Of course, there's always that concern in the back of our minds that as the virus continues to mutate, there may be a chance that it may render, significant changes to the spike protein that we may need to adjust the vaccine a little bit. We see that all the time, like this concept all the time with flu vaccine, for instance. That's why every year we have to change the flu vaccine a little bit. That doesn't mean that the old vaccine or the old COVID or the current vaccines that we have now will not work entirely for the variants. It's just that it might end up with being a little bit less efficient than before. And as we continue to have a way to monitor all these changes and doing all these genotyping and sequencing, we'll be able to pick up when there's significant changes. The good thing is we've learned a lot from these platforms, whether it's the mRNA vaccine or the protein subunit or other vaccines that in order to make some changes, it wouldn't take significant work because we've had years and years of experience. But currently the vaccines work fine for all the mutations that we've seen so far. Over.
Great, thank you. So, well, that segues very well into Carrie Daly Chukwelu. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. So she is asking, will this be an annual shot like the flu shot?
I think it's too early to tell at this point. The study started in June of 2020. They're still collecting data on they're still following the participants of the trials that gave us this good information, but it's still too early to tell. So far, some of the studies have shown that at least it works through more than 4 months, but they're still following the participants, and we'll get more information. Theoretically, we think it should be more than a year, but time will tell. We don't have that much information.
Great, thank you so much. So the next question is from Mr. George Adimenta, who is asking, how safe is the COVID-19 vaccine as compared to the other vaccines? For instance, the flu vaccine, DTP, I'm thinking probably DTaP, etc. Dr. Kumi.
Try to unmute. All right, go ahead. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. So I will be the first to say that, not being a microbiologist, I can't give you all of the numbers. I can talk to you a little bit about the process of evaluating the safety of vaccines. And certainly, as we've heard, we've been doing studies of this specific vaccine with this specific virus for a very short time. The technology, the mRNA technology, is not new. It's been under study for other viruses and in a number of different contexts for well over a decade. So it's not new. And I think that part is important to know, that while it might not be new, it's new to you. It doesn't mean that it is 30 years old, but again, we're still learning in the context of the novel coronavirus. A number of people participated in the studies. The studies are ongoing. Obviously, as more and more people receive the vaccine, they continue to follow them for any challenges or problems. We've given the data we know so far about how effective it is. When it comes to safety, I think it's important to consider that with any vaccination, any medication, studies go on for quite a while. So we've all heard about medications that maybe are studied for quite a while, and then, months, years later, they actually end up being pulled because there are challenges. So if you think about it, with any medical intervention kind, there are risks. And so the studies have been done for the period of time that we've had, and they've been shown to be safe enough that we're saying, hey, we want to do this. In a different setting, maybe we would study it for many more years, but we're obviously facing a global crisis, and the number of side effects or downsides is currently outweighed by the benefits that we're seeing from the vaccine. I can't give you head-to-head comparison numbers with the other vaccines that were named, but it's also important to remember those vaccines were studied in a different way. And so I think it's important to know that the studies will continue to go on, will continue to follow patients, but people have done quite well with this vaccine as far as side effects go, and we know that it is effective in combating the coronavirus. I know that there are a number of people who've had the vaccine, and I suspect there'll be questions about side effects of receiving the vaccine, et cetera, and we'll get the chance to talk about those and maybe compare those to some other vaccines. But I'll pass it back to Dr. Ajiman.
All right, thank you. No, aptly covered, Dr. Nsiakumi. I just wanted to add that, there were 80,000 people enrolled in the Pfizer and Mrna study. About 40,000 people received, the active vaccine, and the other half received a placebo. Out of the 40,000 people, none have reported very severe reactions. We heard cases about, like a few cases about Bell's palsy in some of the studies, but looking at the frequency or the rate, it doesn't seem to be that much different from what you get in the general population. So I just wanted to put that out there. We've also heard reports about anaphylaxis or severe allergic reactions, severe immediate allergic reactions from some of the people who have already received the vaccines. I also wanted to put some numbers on that. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control published a report on the Pfizer vaccine. At the time, they gave the report through December 23rd. They had almost 2 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine given out. About 4,000 people reported some sort of reaction. They looked into it. They thought only 175 really needed further investigation. They went down further to look into it, and it was only 21 of them that had true anaphylaxis or true severe allergic reaction. So that shows you that the occurrence of severe reaction is very, very low. Given that, I mean, it's a little bit higher than you'd see, but I think the more the denominator or the number of people who have received the vaccine lags behind the reporting of the severe event. Because guess what? We have a new vaccine, we have a new technology, and everybody is hyper. It's on the news, it's everywhere. So every report, it's magnified. Not that it's something small for the person experiencing it, but we have to put into context. For example, like we've all taken penicillin or something along that line. The risk of having a severe allergic reaction or anaphylaxis from penicillin is 1 out of 5,000. For the Pfizer vaccine, we are talking maybe 1 out of 100,000. For the Mrna vaccine, the data was published yesterday. It's 1 out of it's 2.5 cases per million. So you can put that into context and see that even some of the medications that we've been taking for a very long time have a higher risk of anaphylaxis than some of these vaccines. But I do get it. We have a new technology on the market and we being vigilant. That said, there are all these monitoring and surveillance systems to catch when some of these, or when these severe reactions occur. Over.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Ajiman. So we currently have somebody's hands raised. I can't see who it is, but please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, are you there? Okay, well, I can't hear the person, so I'm gonna continue with our questions. So Very good question, Dr. Ethel A. Isiano. Can any of these vaccines be taken by an organ transplant recipient with diabetes? Can any of our panelists answer that question?
I'll take that one, or I'll start there. So certainly, because this is still newer to us, and we're dealing with COVID, which is new, the study groups haven't been all broken down into a lot of the subgroups. And so has there been a specific study on transplant participants or on people with diabetes? What we do know is that the majority of chronic health conditions were actually included in those, the trials that we've had so far. And so I always tell people who have underlying conditions, et cetera, to speak with their own physicians. What I can tell you anecdotally is that I know a number of patients who have had transplants, who have diabetes, both people with autoimmune diseases and other chronic medical problems, whose physicians, after reviewing the literature and the information we have from the study so far, feel that the risks of COVID-19 or the risk of the coronavirus disease outweigh any issues or interactions that they would have with their current transplant medication or health status. So I always tell everyone to consult their own physician, but I can tell you specifically that I actually just talked to someone this week who has had a kidney transplant and has diabetes and got their first vaccination this week on the direction of their physician. They initially thought they wouldn't be eligible, but their physician actually advised it, and they've done well so far. So again, I think personal physician input is very important, but I think underlying health conditions are not an automatic no. It's just important to speak with your physician.
And then I can add that I actually have a couple of patients that are transplant patients, and according to the American Society of Transplant Medicine, they actually do recommend for patients who've had transplants to actually get the vaccine. Because as we all know, people that have transplants are immunosuppressed because we have to suppress their immune system so that they don't reject the organ that they've received, and are usually not allowed to take certain kinds of vaccines, particularly those that have.
Yeah, the one about it says white.
Hello, Mr. Owusukumi, could you please mute your phone?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, so so patients that have transplants are typically immunosuppressed because we intentionally give them drugs to suppress their immune system. And the concern is that they can't get certain vaccines, like the live viruses, and whether their body is gonna mount an immune response to the vaccine. And the American Society of Transplant Medicine actually does recommend patients to receive this vaccine. So I hope that answers your question, Dr. Isiano Mitch. All right, great. So we're gonna move on down. Let's see. Oh, and then with the diabetes question, somebody was at organ transplant with diabetes. So patients, I'm gonna, let you guys answer the question, Dr. Ajiman or Dr. Insiankumi.
Thank you. I think, as was said earlier, people with diabetes and all were also included in the study. And so far, there haven't been sub-analysis, but there hasn't been information to show that the vaccine is not tolerable to people with diabetes or people who are immunocompromised, as has been discussed. And I think as the point to note is people with who are immunocompromised or people who have underlying medical conditions are at very high risk of severe complications from COVID. So you have to weigh both. And if you have any reservations, talking to your transplant specialist, talking to your primary care doctor, but I think it will behoove you to have that discussion. But it's not a contraindication. to take in any of the mRNA vaccines. Now, down the road, if more vaccines come into play and we have vaccines that are live, that's a different discussion because we know that immunocompromised patients cannot get live vaccines. But these mRNA vaccines are safe for immunocompromised hosts at this point in time.
Thank you, Dr. Ajiman. So I have a question from MRSLQ, and she says, I have a whole community of residents infected with COVID, except 4 residents with HIV on antiretroviral medications who did not get infected. Is it because they are on antiretroviral medication or just luck? That's a very good question. Who wants to take it, Dr. Ajiman?
No, that's a good question. And it's a tough one. Earlier on, we had reports about some antiretroviral medications possibly being effective against COVID-19. Some of those studies like Calitra, etc., were proven not to be that case when they did like actual randomized studies. So it's very difficult to tell at this point whether there's any weight to this observation. But that said, I haven't seen any publication to suggest that ARVs are very effective. I think, we're still learning about COVID-19 and what works and what doesn't work. And, something may come down the line, but at this point, I'm not aware of it.
Thank you so much. And that's an excellent question. So at this point, I see 2 hands up. I'm gonna invite them. I can't see who they are, but I'm gonna invite them to ask their question. So please unmute yourself if you have your hand up and ask your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Dr. Alfred from Canada.
Dr. Alfred, okay.
And I have a few questions. We know there is the messenger RNA vaccine, which is produced by Pfizer and Mrna. And there are other vaccines produced by other technology, conventional technology. We're talking about the vector vaccines, DNA vaccines, protein vaccines. So which of the vaccines are we discussing right now? Is it the Pfizer messenger RNA vaccine or other vaccines? We seem to have lumped them all together. That's
okay. Very good question. Thank you, Dr. Alfred. So I think right now we're focusing on the 2 vaccines that have been approved by the US FDA for emergency use authorization to be used in the US. So that's the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine and the Mrna vaccine, which are both use the mRNA platform. So those are the 2 vaccines that are the focus of this Q&A. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, having clarified that, I'll ask my second question. We know that these vaccines undergo clinical trials over a period of 6 months. So the safety that they're talking about is the safety over a period of 6 months. How confident is Pfizer or Mrna that after 6 months and over, let's say, a year or 2, the vaccine will still be safe when administered? There wouldn't be any complications.
Thank you for your question. Dr. Ajiman, can you answer that?
Okay, thank you. No, thank you. That's a very good question. And it's one that I had myself in the beginning. Look, back in June, I think I told my friends, you know what, I don't think I'll be first in line to get the vaccine. And then, of course, looking at the data and the information that was released and all that, I got more confident in the vaccine. So I've I went through the whole process of trying to understand and accept it. That said, you're absolutely right. in the normal circumstance, it takes a long time for us to follow, get the steady results and follow our patients or participants and get this, all the safety data. This one, I'll probably answer the question in two parts. Why did everything happen so quickly? One is because we're in a pandemic, and every country, every company is committed to making sure that we have a solution to the pandemic. And vaccine is one of them. Of course, mitigation strategies are key, and vaccines are another way for us to get back to close to normal, probably not completely normal. So there was investment in resources. There was efficiency in the system, because in the past, it would take a long time to even select your study sites, a long time to try to enroll and get things in place, a long time to finish phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. But they found efficient ways through the system. So one, as they were able to combine certain phases, like as soon as they got a sense that it's going to be safe, efficient, they started committing money to production. So that's why things came through quickly. So that's about the process. In terms of how sure are we that it's safe? Typically, from my experience with other vaccines, most reactions or problems plausibly related to vaccines occur within 6 weeks. So that is why in this study and even other studies, we followed the participants for 2 months and provided the initial data. That said, the studies are still going on. These participants are still being followed for those who received the active vaccine, and they're going to be followed for 2 years. Those that received placebo, for instance, Mrna, have already unblinded those that received placebo and given them the vaccine, or start in the process of giving them the vaccines, because we know it works. So it doesn't, it's not good to hold good vaccines back from people, like it's not ethical. So they've already unblinded some people and then given the vaccine, and they are still following these patients. That, and in addition to that, and that's the trial setting, as people get these vaccines, you have the opportunity to report any reactions. Like in the US, for instance, the Centers for Disease Control has the V-Safe system, which is something that any person who gets the vaccine can enroll in, and they check in on you every day, like what symptoms you're having and what not to report. And you have that surveillance system that's new for COVID. And we also have very old system that's already in place for all medications and all vaccines, like the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, the VERS system, that is manned by FDA and CDC and others. So there are all these surveillance systems going on. So to answer the short answer is 2 months is good enough to get information on safety or any adverse reactions that may be related to the vaccine, plausibly related to the vaccine, but they still continue to make sure something in the future doesn't develop. Over.
Thank you for that response. So in short, nobody has an idea about the safety of the mRNA vaccine over the long term. Who could answer this question for me? Why 30 seniors died in Norway after they had been injected with the vaccine?
Have any of you two heard this? I haven't. Do you have a source, Dr. Alfred? We can look it up and get back to you. I haven't heard this about 30 seniors dying in Norway after they got.
Yeah, you'll find it. It's all over the place.
Okay.
Seniors in Norway died after they had received the messenger RNA vaccine. The explanation they often is that probably they had underlying complications, but I think 30 is a big number.
Right, and let me add to that. I don't know the data you're discussing, but thanks for sharing that. And it's a concern. That said, if things can be associated, like there can be causality or not. And I'm sure that these cases are being investigated to see whether, like, what circumstances may be involved in the deaths. Sometimes, of course, one death is one too many, but sometimes things can be coincidental. And until we get more information about the investigations that are going on, it's very difficult to tell. That said, none of the people in the trials so far there hasn't been any deaths reported that are associated with the vaccine at this point. So that's the only data I can quote you. And typically when deaths occur like that, there's a series of investigations that go on to actually ascertain whether it's causally related to the vaccine or not. Over.
Thank you very much. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alfred. Yes, and I did Google and I saw some posts about it, but I have to look into it. I don't know the legitimacy of some of these websites and all these kinds of things. So I will look at it and we will, probably do an update later on as we get more data about this vaccine. Great, thank you. So we're gonna.
So Miss Mavis, Miss Mavis and Mr. Paul both have their hands up.
Okay, is it for a new question? Because I can follow up with
Dr.
It's for a new question. That was for Pearl.
Oh, okay. So I've received some tests about, the same number, the deaths in Norway. And just to reiterate, some things are incidental and until we have more investigations going to understand whether it's related to the vaccine or not, we cannot tell, but we do recognize that, of course, there are 33 deaths that have been reported and needs to be investigated. Over.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So the next question, sorry, hands up. Miss Mavis, can you go?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much, doctors, for putting this together. Yamin Shramopa, those of you that can speak tree as well, because there's so many people that are really, really concerned and have lots of questions, as you can tell with the number of people that have turned up for the for your session. What I wanted to know, and I'm going to ask it in tree because some people have asked me just to ask the question, is so right?
Yes.
So COVID injection and I say and sister my studies be actually say from what me say and no money trials no when you saw them for trials no. But for Pfizer no almost were involved in the trials and it being insane when they took the drug during the trials. Inti ano na mpese mi hu free mo ho say bi a me pa mo chow obi nim hu bibia na me pa chow so nim hu bibia na ka mo share bibi kakra e wo so emayen ya that's it.
Yo, Mavis, mankasa be answer that question. Pacho na uye healthcare worker na.
There be o media numbers na me ya chartered accountant. Mo de
yo, musumo hu hia pa nti eda wase. So I'm going to translate the question for the sake of those who do not understand tree. So Miss Oti Ado is asking about pregnancy and for people that are interested in getting pregnant. Is that right, Mavis?
Yes.
And whether they can take this vaccine.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And you are absolutely right. Say, I am passe. And this is going to be a trial for my translation, right? Okay. I am passe trials no more and Pfizer dear. None of them be anywhere register to start with. But Pfizer dear no almost started no almost fiasco no it be more enemy while on the trial. While trial, right? I don't know what the word is in tree. So say bibi beba na and who say she see there were no adverse events. Minjin this say a be out so far since trial, and I think say at this point. The ACOG, which is American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, release announcement as some say because that virus, the mRNA, and live virus, which is virus and vaccine, virus near live virus into into so far mankasa or meaning say a couple of doctors or so far without any side effects or anything so far. In terms of what's going to see with in Colane or Moyem no mobile woman, I feel na yebihu or more yebihu nebesi. But ACOG in Jindi say unsafe or Mudin say or more monim ebitin yawu. Obi bisame about say ope say wonyema say wa na say onwo. Inti hono na wo nipa kona ope say wonyem no. Ube weigh risk and no benefit. Inti say wo obi a wo essential worker, they be we juma only COVID patients every day, COVID for COVID patients, they be who deal with enkofa or more potentially virus now. Then you have to weigh the risk of say war vaccine or knowing say ACOG say is safe for pregnancy, knowing say ACOG say or more versus the benefits for you, right? Into this is where only doctor discuss say panel wow and say wow based on who individual no situation. Was that a good translation?
It will be some me will be what you mean.
I hope
translation is good. And yes, I say assembly good.
Excellent. So what I was trying to find out, secondly, please, is simply asthmatic for asthma and rheumatoid arthritis. Almost so effective be what Pfizer vaccine just say be a more effect and answer is the same to say be a vaccine yellow fever and is it the same sort of reaction flu vaccine and no be not just say be there's no added risk to say be me pacho. My last question
Pacho you inti mema doctors Dr. Ajiman and I said Dr. Nsiakumi. Oh, Dr. Nsiakumi inti mema Dr. Ajiman I just saw.
You.
I'm Pacho asthma, arthritis, other lung for your kind of saying lung diseases now were included no more trials no, and so far there wasn't any difference. Of course, you been additional sub analysis from that, but there's no indication say vaccine ever more added risk. That said, obia mio wo obia asthma uni asthma who arthritis uni arthritis unya vaccine now. I think about 80 or so % of the people omunya a yaw ewo bibia ewo
paneno
and usually about 12 to 24 hours and about paneno. And one kasa it may call within a day or so. And sometimes maybe now why you say what bread and I walk a cry it is you and in a normal reaction to the vaccine because our vaccine no per se a boosty immune system and now a infection into a reaction no it's all expected
okay
but no added risk.
Thank you very, very much.
Right.
And thank you for accommodating the local dialect. Thank you very much. I did ask before, and the reason why I did that is there are some people on this call who are actually inhibiting themselves from asking the questions because they don't feel as if they're intellectual enough to come and speak the English to us, which is why I translated to English. So thank you very, very much, and God continue to bless you all for all you're doing.
And thank you.
And Carl, can you please translate the responses?
Oh, yes. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, Inti, translating what in English?
Yes, to English. I think somebody.
Right. Okay, so to translate back, the answer that Dr. German gave was that the studies in the patients with, your friend is saying, with rheumatoid arthritis or other arthritis, most of them had injection site pain after the vaccine, and the patients with asthma didn't have any specific side effects. With that all said, there's still data that's being collected, and probably we'll know more as the studies keep going. Right? I got everything?
I think so.
Yeah. So the next question actually that Miss Mavis Oti Adobuating, she wrote was for us to explain in tree the differences between the Pfizer and the Oxford vaccine. And Miss Mavis is saying this, I say, a day so yeah, war Pfizer vaccine, no, and the Oxford vaccine, right? And I'm guessing say from Kasamuno Miss Mavis Ufi UK, right?
Yes.
The Oxford vaccine, has not been FDA in the US no approve the Oxford vaccine in the US yet. I don't think so for the purpose of discussion and then you bet me actually in some Pfizer the versus Oxford the right?
Okay.
But I mean, chime in quickly.
Pachoyo, go ahead, Dr. Ajiman.
You can switch to English now. I'll explain it to the others.
Okay. All right. So just very quickly, the difference between the mRNA vaccine and the Oxford vaccine. So the mRNA, as Dr. Nsiakumi explained earlier, it's a sort of a genetic material that is injected into you, and then it sort of it doesn't enter the nucleus of the cell, but just the outside of the cell to make you produce the protein that I talked about, the spike protein. So that is the protein that the fighting cells would, your immune system will boost to respond to that. So in the mRNA vaccine, it's the small material, the genetic material that has been created to create that response. The AstraZeneca vaccine takes pieces of the virus, like a protein, a small protein, and it does a similar thing, except that it is not that genetic message, but rather it gives you a piece of the protein, and then your body sort of produces the immune response to it. And that's as much as I know. Over.
Okay, to translate into tree, Dr. Ajiman say, Pfizer vaccine you see so far you see America any UK no versus Oxford or AstraZeneca vaccine now no UK but in do America yet no. In so woman say Pfizer there no you see DNA, genetic material that is mRNA, which is answer protein, virus, pieces of it. Immune response. The difference between AstraZeneca or the Oxford vaccine, it's one is an mRNA and the other one is a protein. I mean, 3 words for those, unfortunately. It's Miss Mavis, so let me explain. mRNA comes before proteins in the way that our body processes the genetic material. Does that make sense, Miss Mavis?
It does. I've got biology A levels, so I'll be able to hopefully.
Oh, yay, good. So you for your people. Thank you so much for your question. Thank you. No, okay, now moving on to the next question that we have. William.
Miss Rosa Adete has her hand raised, and Gabriel has his hand raised also.
Okay, Miss Rosa, please go ahead. Ms. Rosa, can you hear us? Okay, Mr. Gabriel, you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just said that a big thank you to the doctors for organizing this wonderful forum. I have two questions. Would you at this time advise the young people to go for the vaccine too? And then what about someone with asthma? I mean, a young person or an elderly person with asthma? And the third question is, how have you been treating people with severe reaction to the vaccine? Because you gave some statistics on how some people are reacting to the vaccine, and how have you been treating them?
Okay, Ms. Adoti, thank you so much for your questions. Dr. Insia, do you want to help us out, or Dr. Ajiman?
I can take part of that. So as far as the asthma piece, we did just hear that people who have asthma have tolerated the vaccine quite well. As far as we know, we haven't seen problems. And one of the things to keep in mind is that one of the primary organs that this virus attacks is the lungs. So people who have underlying lung conditions, we want to be really careful to make sure that they can access the vaccine. I believe your second question was about children, and I will let my infectious disease colleagues shore me up on this. What I can tell you is that the two vaccines that have been approved in the United States, the Pfizer and the Mrna, were tested in people in their mid-teens. So I believe Mrna was age 17 and above, and Pfizer was 16 and above. So the original data includes individuals who are over the ages of 16 as part of what we've learned so far. It's my understanding that there are some early trials ongoing with children. I have a couple colleagues who are standing in line to get their children into those trials, but as far as I'm aware, that's still something that's evolving along with the science, since everything is so new. But I will defer to my colleague to add to that.
Nothing to add, perfectly answered.
Thank you.
Great. So moving on, I think, Gabriel, could you please ask your question?
Okay, so this is Gabriel. I'm actually a hospitalist, and mine is actually not a question. It's a small clarification about the mRNA vaccine, because I know that the concept that is an mRNA, and it sounds like genetic material because people equate it to DNA. And that's one of the major things that causes anxiety for people when it comes to the two vaccines that we are talking about. My simple illustration is, you take an egg, right? The cells in the human system look like an egg with three distinct layers. The shell of the egg, call it the lipid layer of the cell. The white part of the egg, call it the cytoplasm of the cell. And the yellow part of the egg, the yolk, call it the DNA, or the nucleus of the cell where the DNA is. The nucleus is where the DNA is. The DNA is used to produce RNA, which comes into the cytoplasm and is used to produce proteins, some of which are antibodies that protect the human body against infections. So the messenger RNA goes into the cell, but goes into the cytoplasm, where it's used to produce proteins. It is not DNA. It will not go into the nucleus where the DNA is. It will not interact with the DNA. That is a very simple analogy that I have to try to explain to people, just to hopefully decrease the anxiety that people have about the COVID-19 vaccines, the two vaccines that have been approved from the US. Me translate yakochino. Yaka COVID-19 vaccine no ho asemo ma enipa bebre ti se yaka RNA na ama ayam hihyewo abase eye ade bi ebetimi akoni padua no mu asesa obo ade ya ayefre ne DNA a eno na e kire se de nipadua ne sitie ne nipadua ne benyini ne nkɔsoɔ bebree akɔ so wɔ nipadua no mu no. But nipadua no cell na a building block of nipadua no ɛte sɛ kosua. mRNA no a yɛka ho asɛm no ɛnkɔ kosua no yoke no mu. Ɛkɔ kosua no fufuo no nko mu. Ɛhɔ na ɛkɔ na nipadua no de a produce nneɛma a ɛde bɛbɔ yɛn ho ban against COVID-19 virus no. Enti nsɛm a ɛnenam social media so sɛ wogye vaccine na wogye sam biribi a ɛbɛtumi asesa wo DNA anaasɛ ɛbɛma nsakyerɛ bi aba wo nipadua no mu a wobɛtumi de apass on to wo mma ne wo nkyirima no. Ɛnyɛ nokorɛ saa. Kyerɛ sɛ it doesn't even go into the nucleus where the DNA is. Yoke no mu na DNA na ankasa wɔ no. Nkɔduru hɔ nom ɛna nka pɛ sɛ ɛne DNA no a interact. Menim sɛ ɛbɛboa kakra me adwene kyerɛ no.
Yo, Dr. Gabriel, yedawase, papa, I want muna odiamaye no. Perfect analogy in Kosiano. That is excellent. I actually hadn't thought about that. Very good. Yedawase. Thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel.
Mr. Paul Watting.
Mr. Ekobwating.
Paul.
Okay, so then we're just gonna move on to the next question.
Hello.
Okay, Mr. Paul Watting, please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to ask one little question, and it is this. Do you take the vaccine once in your lifetime, or periodically you have to take it? You take it once in your lifetime, or periodically, just like other vaccines, you continue taking it?
Okay, Dr. Ajiman, please, can you answer the question for us?
Okay, we still don't know yet because we're still collecting data. We think it's likely that we may have to take it again, but we don't know how soon after the primary series that we have to take it. And that's the short answer.
And there are 2 doses in the series, so you take 2 initially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
First
one.
So there's some questions in the chat. There was somebody who asked, how come we're saying that the vaccine is definitely safe and at the same time saying we don't know enough? So could the experts talk a little bit about effectiveness and how it's going to be studied in the population, just in simple language?
So, sorry. No, I think that's a very good question. Typically, when we would see a reaction or something that is not safe related to a vaccine, that is, it's related to the vaccine, we typically see it within 6 weeks. And that's from knowledge from not all, but the vaccines that we've had in the past. Beyond that, in the past, there have been some reports that something will come up like, autism or whatever 2 years later, and all those theories have been debunked, that it's not necessarily related to the vaccine. 2 months, that's why the 2 months, at least for the Mrna and the Pfizer trials, followed people for 2 months to make sure that we followed it enough to provide preliminary information. That said, participants are being followed for a longer time to make sure nothing else pops up. But at the current time, with the information that we have, and from our experience with all the a lot of the other vaccines, it is less likely. Of course, it's not that we are 100% sure that something will pop up, but it's less likely. Over.
Okay, so the next question is asking, and I can't see who answered it, but it has to do with luciferase, which is the bioluminescent enzyme that's contained in the Mrna vaccine. And apparently it's people are saying it's connected to the forces of evil or 666, which is in the book of Revelation supposed to be the mark of the beast? And this question is from Edmund. Was that a question?
No, just can it be addressed? Like,
so yeah, can any of you,
is this a reason not to take it?
Can any of you address that? Luciferase and the mark of the beast?
Can I help here?
Yes, who is it? Please identify yourself.
This is Gabriel.
Oh
This
yeah,
is Gabriel
please go
again.
ahead.
And let me put a few things in context first. I am a Seventh-day Adventist, at least in theory. I did my bachelor's degree at Valley View University, which is the Seventh-day Adventist University in Ghana. I did a master's degree in divinity, which is the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary in Andrews University. Before going to medical school at Loma Linda University, which is the Seventh-day Adventist Medical School in California. Okay, I will try to copy a link and share it out because I just did a similar presentation with a church group in UK today, about 2 hours before this meeting started. Seventh-day Adventists are one of the people who are so emphatic about the mark of the beast, 666. It's a very pivotal part of our teachings, okay? The whole concept of the 666, the mark of the beast, whichever term you want to use, is about making allegiance to a power or a force that is not the power of God or the government of God. And so the teaching is that there will be a time in human history where you'll be forced to just declare your stand, whether you support God and God's law and live by according to God's law, or something that is taught and is different from the principles of God's law. There is no chip, there is no something you have to drink, there's no something you have to wear, there's no brace or a crown or a physical mark that you have to take on your body. It is just your allegiance to what is called the mark of the beast, or your allegiance to the principles and teachings of God. It has nothing to do with the vaccine. And in fact, the Seventh-day Adventist Church issued a communication declaring emphatically that the vaccine has nothing to do with the mark of the beast. So I'll share a link both on Facebook and in this chat group on Zoom for people to read what the Seventh-day Adventist Church is teaching about the mark of the beast. Regarding the safety, I was posting something on Facebook now. The simple answer that I give to people is healthcare workers are one group of people that are very difficult to replace within a short period of time, right? I am not saying that any career is dispensable. We are all very indispensable. Without good accountants, good lawyers, good pilots, good drivers, good mechanics, human society will be dysfunctional to some extent. But it would be very difficult to replace healthcare workers. It would be very difficult to replace military and the army within a short period of time because it takes a lot of training, a lot of technical training to replace them. As a doctor, I don't think I can learn to do a nurse's job within a period of even 3 months. It will take quite some time, even with all the scientific, the medical aspect that I know, because there's so much technicality involved that I have to take time to learn. If a government, and not just one government, governments are saying that let's give the vaccine to our healthcare workers first, that alone should give some reassurance that we know that the process of the vaccine's way of working has to be safe. Could there be complications down the road that we don't know? Yes. But the question is, what are the alternatives that we have? Because I can decide to wear the mask all the time, but if the people around me are not exercising the same protocols and obeying the guidelines that we have about wearing out your masks and washing your hands and maintaining social distance, I could still be at risk of somebody infecting me with the virus. This is the best shot that we have. And so much as there is panic and anxiety about the safety of the virus out there, I think the fact that even the government allows the healthcare workers to be the first ones to receive it should be reassuring to us that the data is strong on the safety of the vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Gabriel. That was just phenomenal. That's all I can say. So now I'm going to go.
Addie has her hand raised.
Yes, please go ahead and ask your question.
And then there were some other questions in the chat while we wait for her to unmute.
Okay, so the next question is, somebody, Nas is saying they saw a viral video of a woman suffering convulsions after taking the Pfizer COVID vaccine. How likely is this? I will take this quickly. I think we reviewed some of the safety data regarding the Pfizer COVID vaccine. Dr. Ajiman elaborated on the severe reactions. That's about 1 in 100,000. I don't believe I've heard anything about convulsions. So there's a lot going on social media in all that is attributing different reactions to the vaccine that are plain untrue and unfounded. Dr. Ajiman, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I think you answered it correctly. I know there was one that apparently was being shot live on camera where a lady had an injection and passed out. And I think some video feeds cut that off or not. My understanding is that the woman actually came out to speak on that and say that she actually has a medical condition that whenever she has some pain or something, she
vasovagal. Yep.
Yeah, vasovagal. And that's actually something very important to tease out. Sometimes, Dr. Quartier used the term vasovagal. There are certain things that we do that causes us to temporarily pass out. Even sometimes when you're going number 2, depending on how hard you squeeze, you can vasovagal and pass out. So it really all depends on what the person is doing. That should be differentiated from actual reaction from the vaccine. So it's not everything that you see on WhatsApp or whatnot is true. We have to know the context. And for that, at least that one instance that I know came out, it came out to be debunked that the person actually has a medical condition, underlying medical condition. So over.
Great, thank you, Dr. Ajiman. And then Belinda answered the question of that there are organ transplant recipients that are receiving the Pfizer vaccine at the hospital, HUP, Pennsylvania, I think, University of Pennsylvania Hospital. I think that's that question. Okay, so the next question here is, are there any hands raised?
Miss Addie and Benji have their hand raised.
Okay, Miss Addie.
Panelists also maybe look through the chat and see if they can answer some of the questions through the chat if you're not answering a question.
Hello?
We're running low on time. I also wanted to see if we could extend the time to 5 o'clock if the panelists are okay with that.
Hello, good afternoon.
Hi, Miss Addie. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. We thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and to put this forum on. We greatly appreciate. I believe I have 2 questions. I'm a cosmetologist by trade, and due to the COVID, I really have not gone back into the beauty salon. I am over 60. I'm a little concerned. So my problem, or one of the questions is, as cosmetologists, we can work social distancing if we are with a client. So the point is, how safe are we? How safe are we? Secondly, being that this vaccination was formulated within a short period of time, we know that vaccinations take a couple of years or so before it's being put together. Those of us over 60, how safe are we? Because in the past, we have been used, people of color has been used as guinea pigs. How safe are we? We know that some of our frontline workers are doctors, and we thank you all so very much for taking the lead. How safe are we? There's a concern that we have. We just don't want to be used as guinea pigs. Thank you all so very much, and I'll be waiting for the answer.
Who wants to take Dr. Ajiman?
So do we have that? I can start. I think the safety concerns are very real, and I think that's a big reason that we're all here this afternoon, because we want to get, everyone wants to have more information about the safety piece. And we heard from our infectious disease specialist about, the fact that it takes a few months typically before you start to see problems with the vaccine. One thing we mentioned earlier is that mRNA technology or mRNA in vaccines is not an entirely new concept. It's been under study for quite a while, but we find ourselves in a moment on the world stage where we are in an emergency, and that is, that's a solution that we have available to us. And I think, as we discussed with the vaccine, certainly over time, we do see effects or challenges emerge down the road, but most are quite early. And so these vaccines have been studied in a large enough group that we are comfortable with the safety. Are we saying 100% no? But what we can also know is that, let me just pull it up right. As of this morning, 98.5 million people around the globe have been diagnosed with coronavirus. 2.1 million people have died. So the numbers, every life matters. So let me be clear on that. But when we're seeing some of these side effects and talking about safety, we do want to be careful. If it's you, if it's your family, you want to know. But I think when we're looking at some of the population science, the number of these events or adverse events are much smaller than the number of people that we are losing very quickly. So I think part of the challenge we have is we are learning, we're trying to keep up, but the virus is kind of outdistancing us. And so we do weigh the, we weigh the effects, we weigh the benefits, and we tell everyone to certainly speak with their own physician who knows your own health history well, as far as what is the best way to go. But as Dr. Gabriel mentioned, healthcare workers are first in line to get the vaccine because we believe it protects us so we can be around to take care of our members in our community who are suffering from coronavirus or anything else. So it's a tricky balancing act for sure, but I think the science that we have to this moment says that we have something that will help us now. And that's what we're trying to address, knowing that studies will be ongoing. I'm sure down the road, there will be new vaccines that address the coronavirus. But right now, in this moment, we're doing the very best we can.
Thank you very much. I hope that answers your question. I see one more hand up.
Benji hand raised.
Okay.
Benji
yes,
had
hello.
his hand raised first.
All right, yeah, so Benji here.
Please identify yourself, Benji. Yes, please. We can hear you.
All right, okay. So there are concerns regarding the different variants of the vaccine, and some have expressed fear to the point that the vaccine that might be given in Europe and UK, US, and the rest might not be the same variant that might be introduced to the African population for any reasons that one may think about. So can you allay the fear of such persons who have the fear that the vaccines that will be given to Europeans or in the European nation will not be the same form that will be distributed to the African population?
Thank you very much, Benji. And where are you located? Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Okay, I'm in Ghana. Yeah, Kumasi to be precise.
Okay, thank you for your question. I will answer that very quickly. So we discussed a little bit about the new variants in the beginning, and basically what we said was the new variants, particularly the South African one and the Brazilian one, are similar to the original one in that they just change the spike protein, which is the protein that the virus, basically it's like the lock and key that the virus uses to attach to the human cells, right? So when the viruses are trying to survive, they're always trying to mutate so that they can survive better in different environments, AKA different human beings. So currently, based on the information and the data that just came out, the spike protein changes that the variants have made so that they can survive more to the spike protein is still susceptible to the antibody, basically the vaccine that are in circulation right now. So based on information from the last few days, the variants are still susceptible to the vaccine. Efficacy might be just a little bit lower, but the vaccines are still effective to the variants that are being seen in Africa and Brazil, and the UK for that matter at this time.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Carter, if I may add, I think a different aspect of what Benji was asking is how sure are we that the same vaccines we are getting in the US or the UK is the same vaccine that will go to Ghana or Nigeria or elsewhere?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So there are actually bodies in place to ensure the safety of the vaccines that get to all countries. WHO, or the World Health Organization, has put out a safety guidance. They've published it on their website. And they also do have bodies in place to make sure that whichever vaccine goes to whichever country meets the same safety standards. So there are rules and regulations guiding all these processes. And so I'll bet my money on it that similar vaccines will be circulated in Ghana or Nigeria or elsewhere. And they wouldn't make any special vaccine with different content specifically for Africans.
Exactly. And then to add to what Dr. Agyemang said, I mean, making vaccines are not cheap, right? They are expensive. So the concept of making a separate vaccine for US and a separate vaccine for Africa actually logistically doesn't really make sense, right? Because it takes a lot to get a vaccine going and get, especially with these two vaccines that were developed in such a short time. I mean, it took a lot of money to get them on the market. So conceptually, it's just, to me, like not feasible. Actually, the African countries will not be able to afford a different vaccine to give to their people because it's just not financially feasible. Does that answer your question, Benji?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm okay.
You sound hesitant.
Dr. Pearl, so here's the thing.
Oh no,
I heard. This is
I'm okay. I'm okay. Maybe okay. I just wanted to add maybe a follow-up question.
Sure.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, that one has to do with. Okay, that one has to do with what do you think about the vaccine being made mandatory?
The vaccine is not mandatory. Even here in America, it's completely voluntary. Even among healthcare workers in America who are the phase 1 recipients, it's all mandatory. I have people that I work with that didn't get the vaccine.
It's voluntary.
So, what did I say?
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I meant voluntary. My daughter's over here correcting me.
Okay. So, if I may, sure. Benji, someday, not now, if you work for certain companies, they might say you have to get it, but we're not there yet. At this time, everybody who gets it on their own accord. It's not something that you have to get. And then in terms of whether African countries will get the same vaccine, I think there are some other vaccines around the world that are still under investigation. The cost of vaccines are different countries, and it depends on what each individual country decides to get and how effective they are. At this time, we can't speak on that. And so I think we have to wait to see what individual countries get and then see the efficacy and the safety of those vaccines.
But just to be clear, there are standards in place to make sure all vaccines that are distributed are safe.
That's the bottom line, regardless of what kind it is. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So,
all right, thank you too.
So somebody is asking, Galaxy A5 is asking whether this Q&A session was arranged because health authorities in Ghana have plans to introduce Pfizer mRNA vaccines in Ghana as opposed to other conventional COVID-19 vaccines. We want to put this out there that this has nothing to do with the Ghana government. This Q&A session is sponsored by the Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation of North America, which is a group of Ghanaian doctors who live in North America, primarily the United States, who have a vested interest in healthcare in Ghana. And so we have this organization where we do various initiatives So that's why it's called Ghana. It has nothing to do with the government of Ghana. Nana Akufo-Addo. It has no affiliation with MPP or NDC. This is an independent organization who decided, we decided we wanted to do this because of the misinformation. I personally got thousands and thousands of people asking me questions because I was one of the very first physicians that got this vaccine, and I got too many questions. I didn't have time to answer all of them. So I approached Dr. Eno for us to do this. Next question, hands raised. Please
Rosa
go ahead.
Adote. So Rosa Adote and then the Amwaku family.
Let's do the Amwaku family because we answered Miss Adote's question before. So let's do the Adote family. Let's do the Amwaku family. Sorry about that.
So while we wait for her to unmute, or him to unmute, could we please answer some of the questions in the chat?
Sure, I can't see any right now. Can you read some? Can breastfeeding
mom? Amwaku family, please speak.
Okay, I'm gonna go on. Can a breastfeeding mom receive the vaccine? Yes, so the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology says the vaccine is safe for pregnant and breastfeeding moms because again, this is not a live virus and it does not get transmitted in the breast milk. Next question, is Amako family ready? No? Okay, Miss Adote, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, I have to ask this question again because it wasn't answered. Just as we have the EpiPen for somebody who has nuts or peanut allergy, I would like to know whether a vaccine has been developed to help people with severe allergy, people with anaphylaxis come out. Yeah, that's what I want to know.
I can add, so anaphylaxis related to the COVID vaccine or anaphylaxis in general?
Yes, with the COVID vaccine.
So is there a vaccine against the anaphylaxis?
When you have a severe reaction, you are allergic to it, what do you do immediately to save the person?
Okay, so when in all the vaccination centers, there are, you're supposed to wait 15 minutes if you are normal and don't have a history of any allergic reaction. If you're somebody that already has allergies to peanuts, whatever, and you use an EpiPen, those people are supposed to wait 30 minutes at the vaccination centers. At the vaccination centers, there's supposed to be healthcare workers, doctors or nurses that are there to address the issue of whether somebody goes to anaphylaxis. So there's usually an anesthesiologist on call so that they can intubate and they can do all the necessary procedures that they do when somebody comes, let's say, into the emergency room with anaphylaxis to bee sting or peanut allergy. So a lot of the vaccination centers have this or should have this in place. Now, with the new administration's plan to escalate the vaccination program and some of these locations, I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's going to be arrangements made so that all these vaccination centers will have a way to treat people that have severe allergies. So again, if you're somebody that has a history of a severe allergy, you're supposed to wait for 30 minutes at this at the location where you have your vaccination to make sure that you don't get a severe reaction. Does that answer your question, Ms. Adote?
I think Ms. Adote is muted, but I'll add that the time 15 minutes and 30 minutes has some relevance. For the cases that we've seen so far, which was published yesterday and also last week, Friday, majority of the anaphylaxis reaction occurred within 15 minutes. So that's why we're being observed for 30 minutes and to make sure that everything is caught, because really anaphylaxis usually occurs a few minutes, seconds, minutes after the vaccination. But from the data we have right now, out of the report of the 5 million or so people so far that have received the vaccine, The cases there, I think 21 in Pfizer and 10 in Moderna, the 31 cases so far, majority of them occurred within 15 minutes. So people with history of anaphylaxis being observed to 30 minutes, it's actually a good time to catch whatever would happen. And you have people on hand, as Dr. Corti said, to treat you or help you. All the people, well, the people that we have the data on so far have all recovered. Nobody has died from anaphylaxis so far.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. Okay, and I
Have
see it.
all the hosts or panelists received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine?
Yes.
Yep, I think all three of us have. I shared a little bit of my experience about my initial hesitancy back in June, July. I got the opportunity because I was so concerned and stressed about how fast everything happened, and I hadn't really brought myself up to speed with you know, the mRNA vaccine. So of course I know about the technology, but I hadn't really looked at the data at the time. I took my time to listen, and I actually joined some of the sessions with the FDA. It was open to the public, so there was nothing to hide. They shared a lot of the data there, and then joined some calls with the group that advises CDC on how to make the recommendations, and looked at the data. So that's when I convinced myself that this is indeed very good vaccine for us. I looked at, you know, at the demographics of the study participants, made sure there were people like me in the study participants, the people on the panel advising the FDA and advising the CDC. I made sure there were people who looked like me on the panel making those advice, just to make sure that, you know, we have representation in all those bodies, and we did have those, and that made me convinced that I should get it. Still, you know, I was so stressed. Like when I was going for my first vaccine, I think I ate breakfast and then I didn't eat, like my mouth was dry and all that. I was like, oh, wow, I'm so stressed about this vaccine. I went for it and I was fine. I came to eat my beans and plantain right after. The second dose, I knew that I was expecting to have more reactions, or like, because it's, you know, it's boosting my immune system, so I should have more reaction. And I actually didn't have that much. Like I didn't experience anything. Like I got the vaccine on Friday. I worked a 16-hour shift on Saturday, a 12-hour shift on Sunday, and I was back on Monday, like doing work. So I had my reservations. You know, even though I was armed with the data, I was still concerned. Like, what if I'm that one person that gets anaphylaxis? My second one, I actually got it through, like in a drive-through, and I was like, wait, really? Like, what if I get this reaction? Like, I'm sitting in my car. But, you know, I was able to sit in my car. They had all these lanes. You sit in your car for 15 minutes. They write the time you're supposed to finish your observation. And people are keeping an eye on that. So people are watching you. People are ready to help you. And not that I came in very confident, like, you know, I had all my reservations and, you know, first dose, even for the second dose, I still had reservations, but, you know, I was assured that there were people there to take care of me. Over.
Okay, so yes, thank you, Dr. Ajiman. So yes, so I have received both Pfizer vaccines. So I got my first vaccine. Actually, my reaction, I had a headache that first day of the vaccine. I was at work, everything was fine. The second day I had some muscle aches, like in my legs. It felt like, you know, when you work out really hard and your legs are achy, you know. So, and then I was fine after that. My second vaccine, though, I did get a more intense reaction. So I was like very extreme fatigue, fever, chills, to the point where I actually wasn't able to go to work that day. But then I was able to take ibuprofen, and then within like a 12 to 18 hour period, I felt better. By 36 hours, I was like back to normal, and it didn't really feel like anything had happened. And this reaction actually is being reported in terms of having this intense reaction. I don't want to say anything here about my speculation about that because it's a public forum. But that is and that was actually also reported in the study where some people got a more intense immune response and were not able to like carry out their normal daily activity. So that was expected. Some people would take like an ibuprofen or Tylenol before they got the they went to get their second vaccine. I opted not to because I wanted to get the full experience so that I can actually, you know, say what my experience was without being quote unquote pre-medicated for the vaccine. So that was my experience. So one day, actually, by 2 o'clock that day, which is the day after, I was feeling fine. It was just like the night and the morning where I was like so fatigued, like I just couldn't move. It's like, you know, I'm like, oh no, today I'm not going to work. So so that was my experience. By 36 hours, I was like back to normal, back to my peppy and energetic self at work. So.
In the interest of time, Dr. Phyllis put her response in the chat so people can see it. There's another question. Can the vaccine cure somebody who's already had COVID?
Cure? The vaccine is not a cure. So the concept of vaccines is to either reduce the severity of the illness when you get it, or reduce the chance of being infected because you already have antibodies, and so that when the virus infects you, you don't establish an infection. So cure is not part of the vaccine. Next question.
Sorry, may I please add something?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Dr. Ajiman.
However, if you've been exposed, if you know you've been exposed to somebody who's been infected with COVID, the advice is for you to wait your quarantine period before you go for the vaccine. So don't think that, oh, I just got exposed, I haven't tested positive yet, so I'm going for the vaccine. No, just wait till your quarantine period is over, just for your safety and for the safety of the people who are given the vaccines. Because if you've already been exposed, your test might not be positive until 5 days or so later, but you can still, you know, get the vaccine and still be COVID positive or whatnot, and possibly also infect other people. So once you're exposed, just wait until your quarantine period is over before you go for your vaccine. It's not a cure, and so don't try to take the vaccine just because.
Also, there are people who have had the COVID and they think they shouldn't get the vaccine because they've had the infection itself. What do you think about that?
So your the amount of antibodies that you mount is really based on how, you know, it's very individualized. It's different from one person to the other. So we don't know whether, you know, the antibodies you produced after the infection or you recovered from the infection is as protective as others. It is still advisable. It's advised that everybody who's had COVID before should still go for the vaccine, because that's a unifying sort of a leveling ground. We know how your body will, your immune system would respond to that, and we're monitoring how long that would go for. So yes, if you've had COVID before and you've recovered, please still go for the vaccine. Now, because it's currently like the vaccines are limited, some states, some countries might have some advice on how long to wait after your infection before you go for the vaccine. But eventually, even people who are like anybody who's had or everybody who's had COVID before should still get the vaccine. And I would go with what my country is advising in terms of how long to wait until the vaccine, or to get the vaccine. Over.
Okay, another question. There appears to be new data reported by the BBC out of Israel that suggests that the Pfizer vaccine doesn't have the 95% efficacy. Is this true? And if so, how armed should those who've already taken the first dose be? Second part, in the UK, the space between the first and second dose is being stretched to 12 weeks as opposed to 21 days. What impact, if any, will this have on the overall efficacy of the vaccine? Thank you.
Dr. Ajiman.
So with the first question, so efficacy in the trial is different from real life. So that's why we are still collecting data. And it really also depends on what the practice, the population's practice, how much of the virus is circulating and all that. So there are some things that will impact what we call the effectiveness of the vaccine, as opposed to the efficacy in a controlled trial. That said, when these vaccines were being developed, at best, I think people were hoping for 60% efficacy, 70% efficacy, and we have a vaccine that took us to 95%. There's a chance that in the real world, it might be slightly lower, but it's still very, very good. There are years where the influenza vaccine is probably just 60% effective, and we still get it, and it still helps a lot of people. So I would say if it's time for you to get it, get it. Difference between 90% efficacy or effectiveness, 89%, 95% becomes minimal in the larger population. And the second part of the question was?
It was about the time being expanded.
Essentially, the first dose primes your body. The second dose boosts your immune system. We encourage people, or the guidance is that as close to 28 days or as close to 21 days as much as possible. That said, the antibodies that are produced still hang around for a long time. So there will still be some around day 42 or day 90 that would respond to the second dose when you're given. So you still have some around that when you get a second dose, it will still boost the initial one that you've gotten. There's still studies going on and people are being followed to make sure to see how long that duration can be stretched out. But so far, UK is saying 12 weeks, as somebody said. The US, in very dire situations, is recommending maybe extending to 42 weeks if there's some shortage here or there. But that said, the ideal time is, if it's for the Pfizer vaccine, to get it as close to 21 days as possible, and for the Mrna vaccine as close to 28 days as possible, with the knowledge that it can be extended some, and we're getting more information about how long that duration can be. And it's also influenced by how much of the vaccine we have around.
Pearl or Phyllis, can you take a question? As a cosmetologist, I've elected not to return to the salon during this pandemic. What is your take on the safety of cosmetologists and how we can protect ourselves?
We actually answered this question.
I think we answered that question.
Okay, I must have dropped off at that time.
Yeah. So the question I see, somebody sent me a personal question about, Carrie, you were asking, can you request which vaccine you want, Pfizer or Mrna? So basically, are you asking if somebody can say, I want a Pfizer or Mrna vaccine? My understanding is, it depends on what's available in your state, right? Because now the supply is basically dependent on where you live, which state you live in, and which vaccine is available in your state. So you'll have to go to your state website, the Department of Health website where you are or where you work, and see what's available. And basically that's how I don't think we've gotten to the point where people can choose yet which vaccine they want. I think it just depends on what's available to you where you are, and it's very state dependent. I hope that answers the question. Somebody's hand is raised. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
It's the Amwako family.
Amwako family, please go ahead.
Ask them to unmute.
Okay. Carl B is asking about the different antibodies produced by mRNA vaccines as opposed to antibodies produced from people that recover from COVID-19 vaccine. So that's a very good question. I will answer it a little bit, and then Dr. Ajiman can add to it, or Dr. Nsiankumi. So basically, the mRNA vaccines, the Mrna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine, are mRNA-2 for the spike protein, which is the outside of the virus. Now, remember, so that's the specific antibodies that your body is making when you get the vaccine. Now, when you get the actual infection, the way your immune system handles handles infections in general is a little bit different. Basically, your body chops up the material from the organism that is infected with, and then uses pieces of that, pieces of the foreign proteins that your body has, and displays them on your immune cells, right? So it could be any part of the virus that generates the antibody, right? And I don't know yet, maybe Dr. Ajima might know if they've been able to actually characterize all the sequences of the cells, the proteins that are displayed on the immune cells when your body actually has the actual infection. Dr. Hajiman, can you add anything to that?
Thank you. I think there's still studies going on, but if you just get the vaccine, the antibodies you develop will be for
the spike protein.
So will be anti-spike. If you actually have the actual infection, you will have spike proteins, antibodies to spike proteins, but you will also have antibodies to a nucleocapsid. So it's surrounding the nucleus of the virus, like of the virus within the virus. So if you have if you had an actual infection, you have those two types of antibodies. If you had just the vaccine, you will have just the antibodies to the spike protein. It reminds me of hepatitis B. And that's how we differentiate between people who have been immunized against hepatitis B versus those who've actually had an actual hepatitis B infection. If you have an actual hepatitis B infection, you have the surface, what we call the surface antibody, and then you also have the core antibody. But if you just got the hepatitis vaccine, you have the surface antibody and not the core antibody, if that makes sense.
Great. So there's a hand up. We will take that hand.
I'm Wako family.
And they're unmuted now, so yep, I'm not sure.
Okay, so
Abby had a suggestion that if you take the vaccine, you could schedule it in such a way that you have the day off work the next day should you feel crappy afterwards.
Right. A lot of people are doing that now because of the reports from their colleagues.
And then somebody said the UK, it's now 12 weeks between the first and second for the Pfizer vaccine.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
In the UK, it's now 12 weeks between the first and second vaccine.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with the availability, you know, like because, you know, it has, Dr. Ajaman, can you speak to that?
Oh, I think we talked about that already, that yes, it's plausible that you can spread it to 12 weeks, which is what, 84 days. You still have antibodies circulating around, and when you get the second dose, you can still boost your immune system. I think it all depends on demand and supply. And within the UK right now, with the higher burden of disease going on, they want to make sure as many people get the first dose as possible, because we know even after the first dose, you have some protection. So they want to stretch it out a bit before they give people the second dose. It's all about supply as well. Thank you.
So Benji sent me a private message about a nanobi-lipid layer. I am not aware of this. I asked him to share his source and he said Google and YouTube, so I'm not entirely sure. I usually go with scientific sources like published articles. I am not aware of any nanoparticles in the COVID vaccine, which is a precursor to AI, which is artificial intelligence. Dr. Ajiman or Dr. Insia Kumi or Dr. Gabriel or anybody else, is anybody aware of nanoparticles in the vaccines?
I can talk about the ingredients of the mRNA vaccines.
Please go ahead.
I haven't looked closely at some of the other vaccines yet, but at least the ones are currently authorized for emergency use in the US. It has mRNA fats or lipids. So mRNA, it comes in lipid. It's almost like when you put oil in water and you shake it. The bubbles that come, the fat comes into bubbles or becomes bubbles. So those are the fat cells that are used within the mRNA. And then you also have what we call polyethylene glycol. It's sort of another fat or
It's a solvent.
Solvent, exactly. It's a solvent.
Yay.
And then you have sucrose, which is like glucose or sugar. And then you have potassium chloride and potassium phosphate. The mRNA vaccines do not have preservatives. They do not have eggs. They do not have latex. And that's all that's in the mRNA vaccines. And that's what is published, and it's in the package insert. Whenever vaccines are authorized for use and eventually approved, when there's additional data, there will be package insert that shows exactly, it will list out all the ingredients in the vaccine. And I would ask that people actually take a look at it if you're concerned. They're also very published online as well. Yeah, over.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ajiman. That's what I thought as well. So for those of you that are not aware of what a nanoparticle is, so basically it's like a micro chip. Basically, it's like a piece of like a very tiny computer chip, where in some certain situations, scientists will attach biological molecules to these little surfaces, and is used in different applications. So yes, nanoparticles are a thing in science, but they're not a thing in the current mRNA vaccines that are approved by the FDA, as far as the doctors are aware of today. Thank you, Benji. Any other questions?
I think we were luckily able to get all the questions. There's some really nice comments and suggestions in here.
Yes.
So we went over the time. I really thank our panelists. We can wind down.
Yes, so we have 5 more minutes. I want to thank everybody that came and joined us for this wonderful conversation. I hope we've been able to answer some of the questions and hopefully dispel some of the myths that are out there. We thank all those people that, all the doctors and nurses that, and people who've gotten their vaccine that shared their experiences within the comments. We thank everybody so much, and probably, hopefully in the future, we might do a follow-up session so that we can have a continued conversation about the vaccines and how we're doing with it so far. Thank you all very much.
I would like to add, Ghana Physicians and Surgeons Foundation is an organization that has doctors and also nurses and affiliate healthcare professionals in there. Please look at our website, GhanaPhysiciansUSA.org. We also have a Facebook page, we're on Instagram, and try to follow. We'll have monthly public Q&A sessions that if people aren't able to attend on Zoom, we'll have it on our Facebook page and on YouTube. We also just have some public, we do other public service things. And so please be on the lookout for us. If there are any physicians and other healthcare professionals who would like to join our organization, we are still taking members, and we'll be having our conference in April on webinar format. Thank you. Thank you so much to Dr. Elfriede Agyemang, to Dr. Phyllis Nsiakumi, and to my big sister, Dr. Pearl Kote-Kumaple. Thank you all so much for coming today, and to all the attendees. We really
Dr. Eno, you forgot to add that we do take donations. GPSF takes donations from non-doctor members.
You know, yes, we do. We have a lot of initiatives that we're doing. We have donated things to hospitals in Ghana. We work with people in Ghana. We also do work here. We have residents who come to visit the US and study, and so on, the rights program. So lots of things that we do that we could definitely use people's support in, and also memberships. So thank you.
Oh, somebody is asking for the donation link. Miss Carrie, please go, just Google GPSF on in Google, and you'll be able to get to the website. Thank you so much. We appreciate you all. The questions were fantastic, and have a wonderful evening. And stay safe, wear your mask, social distance. Don't go out if you don't have to. No partying, no funerals, no nothing. Just stay home and go to work. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.